Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Eye of the Crown. We are going to be talking about where Mars is in your chart and what it means to be in your chart from a deep esoteric and psychological analysis. Now, if you're familiar with my work, I did this on Venus in my series, Venus is Not as Feminine as You Think. I took a deep dive in understanding the varying layers of Venus and what Venus is here to do. That's because I like to look at astrology through the eyes of manifestation. That's what Eye of the Crown is. It's about manifesting through the astrology. And I also call that astrology in action. Okay. So I intended to make this talk connected to Mars and understanding how to harness the energy of Mars in your chart. And this is a talk that is deeply in parallel to one of my favorite authors, Robert Greene. Robert Greene is a very well renowned author. He wrote The 48 Laws of Power, but also many other books. And one of the things that I learned about his intentions in writing these books is not to help the dominating spirits of the world dominate even more, but he actually wrote these books so that the people who don't know how to dominate, the people who are often victims, the people who are often hurt by people who dominate, they can learn how to gain their own power. And so that's my vision behind this talk today. You're going to be seeing images from my spiritual warrior, spiritual gangster oracle deck that I'm currently working on. And I'm also really evoked by this deck to talk about Mars because there's a lot of activity in the spiritual community and actually even outside of the spiritual community where people are just being victimized and they're not recognizing their own freedom and empowerment to stand up for themselves, to know what they need and want for themselves. And in the talk about Mars, we can see that this is manifested quite often because we don't want to actually apply our own assertiveness, our own warrior energy to our lives. Maybe we don't want to, maybe we don't have the tools to do that. And so this talk is really building off of what Robert Greene has done in the psychology world, and I want to do that in the astrology world by helping people to see that Mars in their chart is about how you can understand danger and how you can be your own strength in your life. And that's because Mars, in a lot of ways, is the god of war. It's the planet of war, right? It's also the planet of becoming your own warrior, planet of becoming your own superhero. There's also an element of Mars that I'm going to be talking about very deeply, and that's the element that Mars is unkind energy. Unkind energy. Now, in Mars's exalted experience of Mars, is it unkind? It very much so may be. The definition of unkind is to be inconsiderate and harsh to others. And when we think about a warrior, we actually may model an idea of a warrior that is deeply saturated in morale, deeply understanding that they're here to become great, but they also need to understand the dangerous parts of themselves. A warrior does not neglect the fact that they have this unkind energy within them. A warrior does not neglect the fact that they too can be dangerous. So for the people who don't really understand their Mars energy, you may not be recognizing the danger within yourself as well. And one of the most noble people are the people who understand danger, but they have and omit self-control, and they understand the harshness of the world, but they choose to be a warrior of protection. And in my humble opinion, that is the exalted experience of a Mars energy. But we need to understand that in the most primal version of Mars, it is very much so unkind energy. So when we dissect the word unkind, okay, within that word is the word kin. And kin has to do with things that are familiar, common ancestry, family, friendship. Kin is about coming together, an alliance in a lot of ways. And so Mars is actually the opposite of this. Mars is where we have differences. Okay, Mars in the conquest to win something, right? When we look at Mars as a competitor in life, that we have to be unkind to the ones that we are competing with. because there's only one winner. And so Mars is connected to our primal energy to win, to compete, to be competitive. Therefore, you'll see like athletes, you'll see boxers who they'll smack each other around. They will compete deeply, and then after the game, they might shake hands. But in the act of the competition itself, there is no kinship. Maybe they will express in a diplomatic way kinship afterwards, but within the competition, they are actually very unkind to one another. They are not being friendly, they are competing, and they want that. We have to understand that this is an essential part of the human experience, no matter the gender. A lot of people will pin Mars and the idea of winning and competition just on men, right, on the male gender. But it actually is very much so necessary in the female gender as well, because competence and competition is what helps humanity to get better. And that's the importance of competition. We need competition in order to continuously grow and get better in our ability to survive, to adapt, to be strong, to be fit, to have the strongest versions of ourselves. So when we say that Mars is unkind, and the definition of unkind being, harsh and inconsiderate, there's a level of that we have to accept about Mars, because we need that energy in our competitive spirit. So where you have Mars in your chart, you too have to honorably understand unkind energy, right? And understand and respect that unkind energy is essential. And that means that you're going to come up against people in life who aren't very kind, who aren't very friendly to you. And there's an importance to that you have to respect. Now, do you have to become a victim to that? Do you have to become a loser to that? No. In fact, confronting and being around these energies is challenging you to pull out your own inner competitor within yourself. Mars as a sexual energy is very important to understand, because Mars being unkind energy, like unkind energy, is also laced within its rulership over our sexual functions, our hormonal system, and how it is that we reproduce and make more humans for humanity to survive and thrive. So there is a simple logic to Mars being unkind when it comes to sexual energy, because Mars is not looking to have sex with something that is similar to it. It's not looking to have sex with something that is familiar to it, because the word familiar is also the word family, right? And so we don't really understand that the unkind energy is differentiating itself in order to make those sexual bonds, because we don't we don't look at incest as an honorable thing. Right? And so Mars reflects that, in the sense that Mars, when it comes to sexual energy, is looking for differences. It's looking for things that are not kin, that are not friends. So in a lot of ways, you are actually looking to have sex with something to build a new family, but not looking to have sex with the current familiar states of family, because that would be incest, and that would be absolutely wrong. So what we're looking at when it comes to Mars and its functions when it comes to sexual primal energy is healthy sexual energy. And I'm coming to find that healthy sexual energy is really about the libido, and it's important to understand that we have a healthy libido, because a healthy libido helps us to function hormonally. It helps us to be strong in our bodies, to be lethal sexual weapons in our bodies. And this allows us to also choose the right partners to have sex with, as sex is a bonding mechanism, but it's also a health mechanism. Our sexual drive is connected to how healthy we are. And that leads into our drive for life, right? And our drive to live. And so this is why the unkind energy has to be respected to a certain degree. We have to understand that unkind energy that comes from Mars is testing and challenging our sexual health. And it goes without saying that somebody who wants to have sex with someone that they are in a familiar as family oriented are probably not considered the most healthy, right? And so this is the basic grounds of Mars wanting to actually have sex and be intimate with something that's different than us. And so when we talk gender fluidity, it does not, when we talk heterosexual energy, it makes sense. Men are different than women. But when we start to speak in gender fluid conversations, it's the same idea that people are looking to bond with something that is unlike them. And so that is going to be manifested in varying ways and degrees and on the spectrum of what is unlike them. And that is a healthy thing. So when you're looking at healthy sexual energy, you're looking at someone who is looking to differentiate themselves. They're not looking to have sex with something that is just like them. And that's an important aspect of Mars that we have to understand. However, the modality of Mars being unkind energy also makes us see that when we are looking at the talks of love and how sex and love are separated, it's based off of this unkind energy. And so Mars has to fuel itself in and learn how to self-control when we start to bring in the aspects of love, when we start to bring in the aspects of Venus and being more diplomatic with our sexual energy. That's when we start to combine love and sex. And that's why sex and love are separated, but also when they're combined are highly exalted, right? And so this is helping people to see also the conquesting nature of Mars, which is across all genders, right? Of course, we mentioned testosterone being a dominant hormone that is ruled by Mars. And so in the male gender, you're going to see the extroverted conquesting part of that nature, but it's also within females because females also have a Mars, so they also want to conquest. And when we're talking about this on a sexual level, it goes without saying that it's happening in both arenas, and it's really important to understand that. Now, Mars itself, I'm going to emphasize this a lot in this talk, that Mars itself is not about it is about the conquest, but Mars is activated in the pursuit of the conquest, not the conquest itself. In the cliche storyline, that narrative that we give about in a heterosexual arena, that, a man wants to just have sex with a lot of women, right? And we see that once a man, this is not love and sex combined. So it's just our sexual energy, the primal energy of sex. So once a man has had sex with a woman and has conquest over her, right, then he will move on to the next conquest. That's the unkind energy of Mars. And that a lot has to do with the ideas of Mars, that the potency of Mars and the competence of Mars is not in the conquest itself, but in the pursuit of the conquest. This is why the pursuit of the conquest creates competition. And so, again, now we use that as an example in the heterosexual arena because it's a cliche narrative that men has this nature about them where they will conquest a woman and then move on to the next one. So that's an extroverted experience of Mars, right? But you also will find it within women. You will find it within the female to conquest, to go after what they want sexually, and women just as much can discard their prey, right, for the conquest when it's done, because women inherently have Mars and testosterone as well, right? Not the same levels, but they have it as well. So now when we take it out of this gender specific sexual orientation and we just look at it from a universal aspect, Mars in all of us is the pursuit of the conquest. And this creates a potency of our capacity and our competence because as we compete, we get stronger in these dynamics. Therefore, the unkind sexual energy of Mars is showing us that we must compete in order to understand the negative aspects that can show up when you're dealing with Mars and sexual energy. And what do I mean? In relationships, people get cheated on, people feel victimized by their partner's pursuits of sex, no matter the gender. And they feel deeply and fear deeply of that. But that's because they too are not competing and they're not willing to turn on their Mars. So what I'm saying is your Mars needs to be turned on. You have to understand that Mars is looking to be turned on. So if you're feeling weak, if you're feeling like you've been cheated on, if you feel like in relationships, in dating or in relationships in the sexual arena of Mars, that you're one of the weaker ones and you're dealing with somebody who's a little bit stronger in that pursuit, that doesn't mean that you have to stay weak. It means that that person is showing you the unkind energy of Mars so that you can show up to the challenge and show up. What does it mean for you to be competent in the world of the unkind energy of Mars's sexual nature? And this is why a lot of people get their hearts broken, because they want to combine love and kind energy with Mars sexual energy. And it's very much so possible, but not without respecting the difference of Mars and love and Mars and Venus in its entirety, respecting that Mars is first unkind energy and then can be combined with love in order to experience the, higher octanes of sexual drive, passion, and all the things that Mars really wants us to experience. Yes, when Mars becomes in its higher octane of being a warrior, and then specifically a warrior of love, right? When you want to combine sex and love, and you get that when you combine sex and love, you're going to get passion. You're going to get the root chakra coming up into the heart, and you're going to get someone who has passion, who has purpose, who has drive for those things. And so when you combine Mars and Venus, you also get sexual drive, primal unkind energy mixing in with love, heartfelt compassion, consideration, and you're getting these two things combined together. And so it's really important to understand that Mars on its own can be on its own, is on its own. We have to respect that before we combine it with love and higher octanes of things, because in our primal energy, we are here to survive first before we are here to actually bond and create those, higher octanes of bond and love. And so this is how you also get the variations of different types of relationships. You have monogamy, you have polygamy, you have different open relationships. You have these things because in the variations of relationships, people are seeking to respect Mars first and Mars conquest. And in monogamy, polygamy, and all variations and forms of relationships, those relationships are realized at their best level when they respect Mars and what Mars is doing. Because when you understand that your partner has the capacity to have unkind energy to you, and that in its initial stage is what attracts you to them, because it's the unkind, the unfamiliar, the differences about you that make you attract to one another. It's also differences about you that will make you repel from one another, right? So we're looking at how is it that you can respect the differences between you two, because that's actually what creates the sexual chemistry. And then if you understand that a partner may have a stronger dominant nature to their sexual drive, that does not mean that you have to fall victim, because then Mars does become a predator versus a warrior. So what we're looking for is to help people understand to not be prey to the predator, but to be a competitor. And so if you are dealing with partners who are displaying a conquest or cheating, or their Mars is at high level, their Mars is unkind and stronger than your unkindness, that is challenging you to be unkind to a varying degree of your own morale system, in which you are competing with your sexual energy. And what does that look for you? That's up for you to decide, but you must compete. You must compete so that you will be a warrior as Mars versus a prey to Mars's predator. You want to turn on your own competitor and turn up your own warrior for your own morale in life. You really need to understand that Mars is a purifier. And the people who are real predators and extremists, they are dealing with prey. Okay, so you will never become that if you honor and respect that everyone has the right to be a competitor. So in the world where people say like women need to be submissive and whatnot, it's it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. There's a part of it that I get, but there's a part of it that is creating an extremism that will keep women in a space of being a prey and not realizing their own sexual health and their own Mars health, which is to have that competitor in their physical bodies. And in relationships where, like, women are getting cheated on, but they don't feel free enough to exhibit their own sexuality, that's actually how you win as a part of the female and gender. And I'm getting a little bit biased here, aspect of things, that you must understand that you must compete. You must be physically astute, physically, sexually wealthy and strong to compete, and you must want to compete as a woman and female in this society. So how do you turn your Mars on, and how do you stop becoming a prey, whether you're a gender, female gender or male gender? How do you stop becoming a victim? You have to understand your own dangerous aspects of yourself. It's there. It's very much so there. And everybody has a different varying degree of what makes them dangerous. But you have to look at yourself and you have to start to acknowledge and respect the parts of you that are dangerous, that has the dangerous flair. And so the idea of a noble warrior is one that recognizes the danger within themselves. So then they're not focused on the fear of other people's danger. They're focused on taming their own danger. And that shift, that type of real, that type of authenticity is what makes Mars and Aries energy, the primal energy, the first of the zodiac, the importance of it, because we need that kind of honesty. We need that type of authenticity, which can also mean to say that fear itself is an illusion that we put on ourselves to remain in a victim state. Now, you can also turn on your Mars without even looking at the chart by looking at what it is that you want to conquest. And remember, it's not the conquest itself, but it will be the pursuit of that conquest that'll turn on your Mars. And when you understand the part of you that wants to conquest and the part of you that wants to embrace your Mars and turn it on through that conquest, your sexual drive will also turn on. So therefore, where Mars is in your chart, when you start to pursue the arena, the house that Mars is in, you will also turn on your libido. If you turn on Mars to be a pursuer of your endeavors and conquests, you will also turn on your sexual health and your sexual function. Now, this also means that Mars is a part of in your chart that you're seeking to win. Mars is how you win it in life, and it's also your desire to have a conquest, to achieve a conquest. And again, this is something to understand, that this is universal amongst all genders. Now, do men and males have more of that Mars energy? Absolutely, because like I said, Mars is connected to the hormonal parts and aspects of our system. And so men having testosterone, Mars is actually the ruler over that hormone. So yes, in the male energy, the idea of conquest is very much so there, but it's also within females as well. We need to really recognize that, because without the understanding of your own Mars and need to conquest, you continuously can fall prey. And it's not just women to men, women falling prey to men, but women can fall prey to other women, because there are women in this world who really understand their own Mars energy, whether they call it Mars or not. They're operating in that competitiveness. And if you are not willing to accept that that aspect of yourself, the testosterone within you, then you're going to really be quite often the one who's bullied, the one who's victimized, because Mars is there to help you find that own conquest within yourself. So Mars in our chart is where we're looking to achieve conquest. And in a lot of ways, it's not the conquest itself, but the drive towards that conquest that turns your Mars on. So where Mars is in your chart is where you're seeking to have a conquest and it gets turned on. So let's quickly go through the houses systems and where Mars is in the houses and how that conquest can actually be recognized in your chart. When we look at the first house, Mars is looking to win and to conquest over first impressions and physical presentation. So basically, when somebody walks into a room, the face, the body, the whole ensemble and how it's put together, Mars is looking to be the one who is embodying and winning over first impressions. And as the conquistador, the conquestor, whatever, however you would say that, Mars is seeking to have someone like that as well, because Mars being a taker, an unkind energy, right? It's inconsiderate, wants to take someone who has those physical traits as well, the face, the body, the presentation, and deeply honors and respects that and wants that. And so Mars is looking to win somebody who has that as well. Mars in the second house is a money winning energy because the second house is connected to income. So this is a person who wants to make the most money, who wants to win that, and they want to conquest that. And they typically may want someone who is like that as well, right? They're trying to conquest somebody who is a winner of money. But the second house, I always say, is underwhelmingly not focused on the production aspect. So the second house is also a producer of things, someone who takes their raw materials, their raw talents, and makes something of it. So Mars in the second house is winning at being the producer of creating things, of making things out of scratch, out of nothing. And Mars likes to conquest the types of people who do those same things. They really value they really are winning the value of themselves, being valuable to others, and they're looking for someone who is a very valuable person. And so that's what Mars is looking to win here. Mars in the third house is a house of communication. So Mars is looking to have the first word and the last word in the third house. It wants to win over your ears. And this is an energy that wants to conquest your way of listening and thinking by what it is that they have to communicate. And because Mars is a conquesting energy and wants to achieve conquest, it's achieving conquest over having the floor, having the last say, but also may conquest and want someone who does the same thing, someone who can get other people to listen as well, because that will really motivate Mars, because Mars wants to do that as well. So Mars is really twinning energy here, but it kind of is a seeker of conquesting people who are also dominators too, because Mars wants to be the ultimate winner. And so that's what Mars is doing in the third house. Mars in the fourth house is looking to be the leader of the home, is looking to win over the home, meaning win over the head of the household. And in the fourth house, Mars is also looking to conquest homes. So this is an energy that wants to win the best home, wants to win the best shelter, and also the best security, the best army in a lot of ways, because the home is where you start to build a sense of familiarity. But again, Mars's unkind energy is not looking to make friends. It's looking to make an army of people, of soldiers. So in the fourth house, Mars is also very connected to its country and wants to be a warrior for its country. So it wants to win the favor of its country and also wants to conquest someone who also wins favors of their country. In the fifth house, Mars is looking to win over the dating atmosphere, the romantic atmosphere. It's looking to win over joyfulness and not to be basically boggled down by the trials and tribulations of dating. So it wants to be the most flirtatious. It wants to be the one in the room that everyone wants to, you know, kind of be with but not commit to. And it has this jovial energy because that is actually how you win in the fifth house. And the conquest is to possibly have as many dating people possible, or to actually conquest the date who is also the other most favorable one to date on the opposite side of the gender or the opposite side of the coin, whomever it is that you would be attracted to. You would want someone who's just as wanted by everybody else. Also, Mars wants to have the winner wins of having the most children or having gains with their children. So this is also why it can be clandestine, but doesn't have to be. But it's flirtatious. Its potency is important to win here. Also, Mars wants a lot of talent and the stage in the fifth house. So this is also the person that wants to have the most talents, and that can be actual hobbies and interests, or it could go back to the romantic atmosphere, being just the most talented when it comes to all the things, the skills and talents that you need to be romantic and dating. So Mars is looking to conquest being the most talented here in the fifth house. In the sixth house, Mars is looking to be the most healthiest, the one who has the most accountability, the most gauging on responsibility, but at least the most accountable, the most healthiest. Mars wants to have the best work ethic, wants to be the hardest working person in the room, and it wants to win at like acing their homework and being exceptional with their work. And so Mars is very competitive when it comes to those things, more than likely the most competitive amongst their other co-workers. And even if they don't work in a co-worker habitat, they have somebody that they're competing with that they want to be better than when it comes to their work ethic. They want to be the first ones in the room, the last ones when everyone leaves. And also their conquest is to conquer over someone who has a similar work ethic or the best work ethic, which keeps the competence up for Mars in the sixth house. Diplomacy and devotion come into play in the seventh house. Therefore, Mars is looking to win at being the most diplomatic. And while many people will give, the ancient rules that Mars isn't as, fruitful here, it's just not true, especially when you're looking at it from an astrology and manifestation angle, that the seventh house is where Mars is looking to be the most peacemaker. So Mars actually can embody a warrior spirit that brings peace. It can be also wanting to win over their partner's faithfulness and devotion. And it's here to redefine itself in the seventh house because it is its oppositional house. Therefore, Mars can also be wanting to win the most attraction in regards to all things, because there's this idea of being the muse, of being the favorable counterpart. And so Mars also may conquest and want to conquer a partner. And a partner who's conquerable is someone who can't be conquerable. Therefore, Mars may take the biggest challenge in having a conquest of somebody who either is the most faithful or the least faithful, in order to exhibit Mars's challenge of being the one that could turn on the faithfulness in others and the devotion into others. A very challenging aspect, but if capable, creates a dynamic of incredible competence in relationships and in anything that they have to be committed to. In the eighth house, Mars wants to be the winner of all the takers. So it wants to be the one that actually takes and understands the power in that very thing. And Mars in the eighth house is a sexual energy, and so it wants sexual power based off of the sexual appetite of others. It wants to satisfy those powers of being either the seducer or the one that is being seduced, but not prey in the idea of being seduced. So Mars here is also here to be the most transformative, to shed its skin, to change when necessary, to adapt when necessary, to rebirth and redefine itself when necessary, and to be the one that does it the most. So there's a level of Mars being a conquest of its own immortality here, of recognizing the illusions of death, of conquering the fears of death, and understanding that its greatest danger is that it cannot die. If Mars can conquest that, then it almost has nothing left to conquest. So Mars is also looking for someone who is willing to take life by the reins as well, and wants to have a conquest over someone who is also sexually appetizing as well, sexually seductive as well. Mars wants to be the winner in the house of sex. Similar to the fifth house, this could be desiring to be the most fertile, the most capable of having children, of birthing in the eighth house. External power is the conquest. In the ninth house, Mars is looking to have the most knowledge, the most education, and the highest education. And sometimes that can be confused for collegiate. It can also be streets education, depending on the zodiac sign. But Mars wants to have the most education depending on what the sign is that it's educated on. And it has a conquest of being a spreader, a provider of its own seeds of knowledge and light. So Mars wants to have the most students to give that knowledge and light to in the ninth house. Sometimes it can also be seen as sexual. Of course, everywhere where Mars is, there's a sexual capacity to it, right? In the ninth house, it can be wanting to also, similar to the fifth house, spread its seed, have children, have different domains in that arena. And so children can be metaphorically students, or it could be literal children that we find in the ninth house. In the 10th house, Mars is looking to experience winning when it comes to titles. So this is the person that wants to have the best trophies, that wants to have the highest titles. And so once it conquests a trophy, right, it may not want the same trophy. Sometimes it will, if it wants the same trophy, it wants more than one, so that it's always like gaining more on what it has won in the ceremonial aspects. But eventually it may want to move on to another title or another ceremony or another type of trophy, because Mars really wants to conquest the idea of being the most respected in the room. And again, Mars is sexually motivated in all of its placements, but here this person also is deeply sexually motivated, and their sex turns on when they win. And remember that in all of the aspects of Mars in pursuit, your sexuality turns on. So it's the same here. It's probably the most seen here because the 10th house is publicly seen. It's like a public house, so everyone sees it. It's a public service. And in a lot of ways, Mars also wants to win over being the biggest public dominator authority through maybe the act of service or being the manager of other public servants. So its conquest is very much so public. It wants to conquest the public eye in itself. The 11th house is known as a house of gains, of hopes and wishes and visions. So Mars wants to have the best vision in the 11th house. The 11th house is also connected to influence of groups. So Mars wants to be at the top of the hierarchy in their group so that they can have the best influence. The pursuit of being amongst alliances and friends really motivates Mars sexually. And yes, all of the placements of Mars are motivated sexually when they're in the pursuit of their win and their conquest. Therefore, Mars here gets really turned on being amongst groups of people that they can influence, and they want to conquest the group's vision and the direction of the group. They also want to conquest a partner that also may have a similar influence, maybe in a different arena, because if they're in the same arena, then they become an enemy that they have to take out. So Mars in the 11th house is really in pursuit of having that impact on many, on a big audience. It may come as a shock because people continuously use limitations on the planets based off of their elemental placements. And it makes sense that people would think that the element or the place that it is could deplete the planet, but that's just a linear way of thinking when you understand nature. So Mars in the 12th house, it's just not an extroverted win, but because its wins are behind closed doors. So Mars wants to be the biggest winner of discrete affairs and business. And Mars here does not want to be seen for its spiritual motivations, but it typically is looking to win over heaven, to win heaven in the afterlife, or to win heaven on earth in the current life. And that's its conquest. It also can be a conquester of, because this is sexual, clandestine affairs, being the one that has the most, secret sexual or business affairs that people can't see. And so this gives them a secret power that people can't see. Very similar to the 8th house, who wants to win power. But the 8th house is still more looking for external power, where the 12th house wants secret power. So you can't see why this person has so much influence and power, because it's happening behind closed doors. And Mars also wants that spiritual respect amongst the unseen world. And whatever that unseen world is to them, that's what they want that respect from. And that's how Mars wins and gets turned on in the pursuit of that win in the 12th house.